Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for being here. Today I've got Dr. Guidry from the Office of Public Health to answer any questions related to testing and so forth. We also have Colonel Jim Wascom of GOSEP here to answer any specific questions you might have related to Tropical Storm Cristobal. As you all know, that tropical storm did make landfall yesterday in southeast Louisiana near Grand Isle. The storm could have been a lot worse, I'm very thankful to say. We were largely spared from the most significant impacts that had been forecasted. Many weather officials have said we were fortunate, in fact, to avoid many of the flooding and storm surge issues that had been predicted. And some of these issues did materialize, but they were further east, and that's because over the last 48 hours, the track of the storm itself moved east, and we always knew that the east side of the storm would be the worst. That being said, state and local officials are still responding to a few issues. For example, I know that at Fontainebleau State Park in the Mandeville area, 10 people were rescued by the Mandeville Fire and Rescue Team. 19 others were evacuated from cabins by park employees. We're very thankful for that. Down in Jefferson Parish at Grand Isle, the city has requested 5 additional emergency pumps with a fuel truck and an operator. I can tell you the Corps of Engineers is providing the pumps. Jefferson Parish are transporting them. In addition to the 5 pumps already provided by Jefferson Parish and by CPRA, and the 11 permanent pumps there are 26 trying to move the water off of that island. I can tell you that happened because a back levee, one on the bay side, on the north side, actually was overtopped by a storm surge. CPRA will be working with local flood authorities to begin opening floodgates today across the coastal zone as soon as it is safe to do so. At this time, 171 gates remain closed. 13 roads were closed during this weather event. Many have either reopened or will reopen very shortly as water recedes. As always, you can visit 511la.org to see real-time updates on road closures. There were just short of 4,000 power outages due to this tropical storm. I think 3,997 was the last number that we got from the Public Service Commission. And even though the immediate threat from Cristobal has passed, there is the potential for more heavy rainfall as some of the trailing rain bands continue to move through the area. And of course, the only danger we have for significant flooding is if one of those bands basically becomes stationary and sits and dumps a lot of rain on one area. If that happens, flash flooding and some river flooding could occur. So everyone needs to continue to be on guard. Tides remain elevated, and a coastal flood advisory is in effect for all coastal areas, as inundation of less than 3 feet will be possible during high tide today. Overall, Tropical Storm Cristobal provided the state with a good test of our hurricane response and preparedness, including adjustments needed to deal with the COVID-19 conditions. And this includes all the coordination necessary with our local partners at the Offices of Emergency Preparedness, whether it's for potential sheltering needs, nursing home support, placement of equipment such as pumps and generators, the current status of levee work in areas that continue needing upgrading and potentially immediate emergency attention. If you haven't already done so, I do encourage you to please go to getagameplan.org and stay prepared with emergency supplies and evacuation plan and emergency communications for your family and for your business. And you should remember, this was only week 1 of the hurricane season. It is predicted to be a busy hurricane season with above average activity throughout. So please keep your guard up. If you are someone who, like me, prayed that Tropical Storm Cristobal would not do much damage to our state, now is a good time to offer up that prayer of thanksgiving as well. So I'd encourage you to do that. Switching gears now to COVID-19. For today's testing update, we're reporting 234 new positive cases on 8,507 tests. That is a lot of tests for, and I think that's indicative of testing effort that we have going on across the state of Louisiana with many partners. That's a 2.7% positivity rate on the test that we're reporting today. Sadly, we are also reporting 6 new deaths, which brings the total deaths to 2,831. We have 7 more patients in the hospital with COVID-19 across the state of Louisiana, 582 in total, than we were reporting yesterday, with 3 less on ventilators. We have 71 patients across the state who are COVID positive on ventilators. We always update the presumed recoveries on Monday. You can see that we now are reporting 33,904 patients have recovered. Some of the mobile testing sites across the state closed due to the storm, but they will be reopening soon. In fact, I expect them to start opening tomorrow. We will update you as they come back online. Hopefully, many people stayed home this week as Cristobal made its way through the area. But as we move further into the summer months, please keep in mind that there still is a lot of COVID out there. We want the positive trends that we've been able to see over the last number of weeks to continue. And I will tell you, one of the most heartening things is we're now 2 weeks removed from the Memorial Day weekend, and we have not seen the surge in cases or hospitalizations that could have come with that increased mobility and the contact that we saw happening across the state of Louisiana. I think a good reason for that is much of it was outdoors, and many people do continue to wear masks and to socially distance, and which is what we're asking people to continue to do. I was encouraged today by a new LSU survey showing that 62% of the people say that they either always or very often wear face coverings when outside the home. That's an increase from April when only 48% gave that same answer. And 76% of people agree that wearing a face covering is the responsible thing to do. And it certainly is. And that's why the CDC has recommended it, and that's why the Office of Public Health as well. And to update you further, on Monday, as you know, we update the number of deaths by race. As of today, 53.2% of deaths from COVID-19 in Louisiana are of African Americans, which is lower than it had been previously. You may remember the first time we reported, I think it was just shy of 70%. But 33% of our population is African American. And so we can still see that this disease is still having a disproportionate impact upon the African American population here in Louisiana, and that's really true across the country as well. But that's why we here in Louisiana several weeks ago created the Health Equity Task Force, and it's also why the work that they're doing is so important. And one of the most important things that we can do is to continue to highlight these disparities, figure out what the underlying cause is, and make sure that we do everything that we can to remedy that so that people are in better health, not just as it relates to COVID, but as it relates to everyday life and quality of life. Looking ahead, we're going to have our next press conference on Wednesday of this week, and thereafter we're probably going to shift to having scheduled COVID press conferences once per week going forward. And we'll make sure that you know on Wednesday when the next one will be after that. But we're anticipating having another press conference on Wednesday at 2:30. At this time, I will take your questions, and don't forget I've got Colonel Wascom here and Dr. Guidry, should you have questions that you want to direct to them. Yes, sir.
Governor, have you made any decisions on whether to veto or sign the tort reform bill or the bill that would shuffle the CARES Act money to small businesses?
No, but obviously we'll be making an announcement on those bills and many others by the end of the week. Yes, ma'am.
Governor, the New Orleans police chief has acknowledged that there were some sort of rubber balls fired at protesters on Wednesday. I'm wondering if you had a conversation with the police chief about that, and if you have concerns about the fact that that was the kind of response that protesters received.
Yeah, well, I have not had a conversation, first of all. I've had several conversations with the mayor, but not any specific to the rubber projectiles that you're referencing. It's my understanding that the chief has indicated that, to the best of his knowledge, those projectiles were not authorized. There's an investigation ongoing. He's trying to figure out exactly how many officers, who they were, and why they were used. And really, until that investigation is concluded, I'm not going to get in front of it. I will say that the overwhelming majority of the demonstrations and protests that we've seen in New Orleans and quite frankly around the state have been peaceful, nonviolent. They haven't engaged in property destruction. And so obviously we would want the interaction between law enforcement and the protesters to be as peaceful as possible as well. I wasn't on hand. I don't know exactly what was transpiring at that particular moment, and so I can't offer any more comments on that, other than to say that as we move forward, if there are going to be more protests and demonstrations, we would obviously want them to be as peaceful as they have been, and that the individuals can voice their concern.
I asked you this was before we entered phase one. We see a spike. Has your thought process into how you would respond changed now that we've gotten into phase two?
Yeah, you know, we need to know whether the spike in cases is a function of the increased testing, whether we believe that the spike suggests community spread, or whether it's really in congregate settings, whether it's leading to additional hospitalization or not, and if so, are the hospitalized patients more acute or less acute? There's so much that goes into this, and really if we get to where we see a spike in cases, we will sit down with all the experts, both at the state level and at the local levels, and try to figure out what response is most appropriate. And so I can't really judge that. There are just too many factors. I am heartened by the fact that we, quite frankly, haven't seen them. Now, we still have concerns, particularly up in Monroe, in Region 8, which is that area in northeast Louisiana, where we're still seeing, and it's not approaching anything that would threaten our capacity to deliver health care, but we're seeing more hospitalizations, we're seeing more cases, and so we're trying to figure out now exactly what's going on there and what additional steps we need to take, whether it's testing, whether it's communication, so forth up in that region. But I'm really heartened that we haven't seen it across Louisiana. And look, we may see it. You are seeing it in some other places. It could just be that we were several weeks ahead of these other states, and sort of they're behind us, and so forth. You know, I don't know. There's so many things that are going on there, but we're going to continue to make sure that we're testing as much as we can. No less than 200,000 tests again in the month of June, accompanied by the requisite contact tracing, I should say, when someone tests positive, because we think that's the only way to really monitor what's going on and keep those cases down and try to keep them from spiking going forward. Sam?
Governor, have you talked with any lawmakers about police reform initiatives? We've seen some proposals come to light since the death of George Floyd, particularly in the special session. Someone wants to take on qualified immunity for law enforcement officers. And then I guess the next opportunity might be a special session later in the year or next year. Are you open to taking on things like qualified immunity or other aspects of police reform? Do you think that's necessary?
Well, I have had a conversation with a number of senators last week. Specifically, Senator Cleo Fields mentioned that he was looking at undertaking an effort. It would be a broad scaled effort that he would undertake, really with a goal towards introducing legislation in the regular session of 2021. So that's the timeline that I believe he is on. I haven't had conversations with anyone trying to frequency the unreasonable application of force that's happening across the country is growing. It's unacceptable. And whether it relates to election of officers, the recruitment of officers and their training, their supervision, their retraining, all of these sorts of things, or all of them, you know, I think it all bears a close scrutiny, and I will certainly work with them to make sure that we're doing our part in Louisiana. And so I do look forward to that being a part of upcoming legislative session. And I also hope that we can achieve broad consensus that action is necessary, that action should look like. We need to do this in a responsible way, but it doesn't delay unnecessarily the reforms that I believe are needed.
Do you support the effort to departments take a look at how much we're spending on law enforcement and allocating that money elsewhere?
Yeah, no, I'm not here to advocate defunding police departments. I mean, we still have crime out there, and you know, when you invest in appropriate police work, whether it's a sheriff's office or a police department, you are investing in the community, but it does need to be appropriate. And we need to make sure that we're doing everything we can to ensure that our officers are interacting with the public without unreasonable use of force. And that's the most important thing that we can do. I think some reforms are necessary here and as elsewhere in order to make sure that that happens. Yes, ma'am.
Governor, have you talked to the Republican legislative leadership about the various tax breaks at this point? Are there any ongoing conversations about what they're considering and what you'd be willing to sign, and is that part of negotiations?
Yeah, no, we've had some conversations. They're generally at a high level, and just discussed the need to be able to pass a reasonable budget to make sure that we can continue to deliver the essential services and meet our most pressing needs and priorities in the state of Louisiana, and doing so in light of a revenue estimating conference forecast that is almost $900 million less than current year. And so even with the CARES Act, we still have challenges there. So just talking about the need to get the balance right and to move forward. But in terms of specific instruments, we have not had that level of conversation. Yes, sir.
Governor, it looks like the numbers for contact tracing of how many people y'all are reaching is similar to other places around the country, but very low in terms of how many people actually answer the phone. Is that a growing worry for you guys as you look towards contact tracing, just having people pick up the telephone?
Well, it's always something that's concerning when you know that it's important in terms of trying to keep the cases down as we re-engage more sectors of our economy, get more people back to work, get more customers in stores, bring people into contact with one another more frequently. We know that we have to test more, and the testing has to inform contact tracing, and the contact tracing has to be effective. It's not going to be effective if people don't answer the phone and allow the contact tracer to share information with those individuals as to what they should be doing in light of the fact that they either tested positive or came into contact with someone who did. So we do encourage people to look for those calls and to take those calls and to participate. It is obviously not mandatory that people do that, but it is the right thing for people to do. And so if to the extent that people are not cooperating for whatever reason, then that is concerning.
Do you think it's started to thwart the state's effort to respond to the coronavirus? Or do you think we're still doing that?
Yeah, no, I'm not going to say it's thwarting our efforts. We just know that it's limiting the effectiveness of those efforts at this time. And we hope that as we continue to emphasize the importance of contact tracing and what individuals' roles are in that overall effort, that there will be more support and more cooperation. Today's your day.
Yeah. Have you spoken with LSU officials about there was an incoming student who apparently made a racist remark on social media? LSU responded to it. There's been a debate sort of raging at LSU. Have you spoken to school leaders over there, and do you have any comments about what's going on?
Well, obviously the comments attributed to this individual, who I'm not sure is a student, and this is part of what's going on. It may be someone who was offered admission but not yet enrolled. But those comments are vile and disgusting and have really no place in our society today. And I would encourage people to reject out of hand that kind of racism and bigotry and prejudice. Now, I spoke with the chair of the board, Chairwoman Mary Leach Werner, this morning. I know that the university is doing an investigation to figure out exactly what the status of that particular individual is and what, if any, official policies of the university were violated and what their next steps may be. And I really don't want to get further than that because I quite simply don't know more than what I just told you.
Last question.
Well, I guess that was it. So I want to thank you all. We will have a press conference at 2:30 on Wednesday. It'll be back over at the Capitol. We will be having a UCG meeting here that morning at 10:30 as well. And we will have the COVID press conference update at 2:30 that afternoon. And again, moving forward, we believe we'll be doing these once a week, although there'll be 2 this week. And we'll let you know what day next week and beyond we intend to hold those, although we're leaning towards Wednesdays for those additional press conferences. So I want to thank all of you for being here, and I want to thank all the people of Louisiana who are taking COVID-19 seriously, who took Cristobal seriously, and quite frankly, who are doing what they can to make sure that the protests and demonstrations that are taking place here in Louisiana, in cities large and small, are peaceful, that they are nonviolent, that we're not engaging in property destruction, and that people's voices are being heard. And I think now it's incumbent upon all of us to make sure that those voices are not only heard, but that they cause us to really look at what we're doing in Louisiana and around the country and implement reform as necessary to make sure that police officers are appropriate in their use of force. And we're going to make sure that we're taking that seriously here in Louisiana. So thank you all, and I will see you on Wednesday.